Welcome back to the Introduction to Viscore video series. This is video number 2 regarding the Viscore user interface. This video assumes you have already successfully installed Viscore and the test Coral datasets. If you need help with those steps, look back to video number 1, which is called Getting Started. Note that during this demo, I'll display the keys and buttons that I'm pressing in this box in the upper left corner of the screen in order to reinforce the instructions as we go along. To start Viscore, you double-click on a Viscore dataset. So it's worth starting with a basic understanding of the structure of these datasets. Viscore datasets consist of a folder full of files and subdirectories. For example, the Coral test dataset is comprised of everything within the Coral test directory. Here you can see there are a bunch of subdirectories and files, most of which start with the common name Coral test. Over the course of the video series, we'll get into the details of what each of these files within the dataset are for, but for now, just remember that the key to accessing a dataset is the .vml file, which is known as the project file. It's the one that has a star as an icon. To start Viscore, double-click on one of these project files, the .vml file. Viscore then opens with two windows, the viewer window and the console window. The viewer window typically opens full screen, but you can toggle between full screen and windowed view with F11. Once you've made it a window, you can move it out of the way or resize it if you want. Here I've moved it to the side so you can see the console window. You can also go back to the full screen video by toggling F11. To quit Viscore, use the escape key. Normally, the viewer window is all you really care about. The console window is mostly for development purposes. However, should something truly strange be happening and you need to quit, but for some strange reason the escape key isn't working, you can close the console window by clicking the X button in the upper right corner. This will kill Viscore quickly. Note, try not to close the viewer window with the X corner because some linked libraries don't shut down gracefully if you do it this way. Instead, use escape or close the console window instead. A final note about starting Viscore is to realize that there's no equivalent to a standard open menu. So if you start Viscore by double-clicking on the executable icon, you'll just get a blank white screen and it will seem to hang up. This is a good example of a time when exiting by clicking the X in the console window is appropriate. Remember to always start Viscore by double-clicking a project file, not the executable itself. The first thing everyone will want to do with their model is to explore it by zooming, panning, and rotating. Rotating is done with a left mouse button drag, by which I mean hold down the left mouse button while moving the mouse. You can rotate the model in each direction around a point at the center of the window called the target. The target is the center of rotation, and it's normally located at one of the points on the point cloud. Zooming is done with a right mouse button drag. Dragging down with the right mouse button zooms in, and dragging up zooms out. Rotating and zooming are quite intuitive, and they quickly become second nature. Panning is done with a middle mouse button drag. Panning can also be done by holding down both the right and left mouse buttons while dragging, which is useful if you don't have a 3-button mouse. It's worth noting that panning does not guarantee that the target will stay on the surface of the point cloud. That can become confusing for subsequent rotations and other actions. So to see why, let's spend a minute to understand the target a little bit deeper detail. The concept of a target is important for almost all the Viscore operations. If you think of the viewer window as a camera frame, the target is a point along the optical axis of the camera, placed at some distance away depending on the zoom that you have set. Zooming moves the camera along this optical axis, either closer or further away. Rotating moves the camera around the target and changes the angle of view of the camera to always point at the target. Neither one of these operations moves the target relative to the model. Panning, in contrast, moves both the target and the camera parallel to the focal plane of the camera, which is to say, parallel to the view that you see in your monitor. Thus, the location of the target can drift off the surface of the point cloud in a pan operation. There's another important view control, which is the left mouse button double click. A left mouse button double click moves the target to the point in the point cloud closest to where you click. This has the added effect of rotating the camera view so that the target always remains in the center of the screen. Therefore, a left mouse button double click followed by a rotation could also be achieved by a pan followed by a left mouse button double click. Either way works, but really the key point is to remember that a left mouse button double click is a good habit to get into because it always resets the target onto the surface of the point cloud. I'll show an example of that here. We can either pan and then left mouse button double click, or we can left mouse button double click and then rotate. Either way achieves the same end, but the important point is that it's good form to get in the habit of using the left mouse button double click regularly to ensure that your target stays on the surface of the model as you zoom and pan and rotate around. A proficient Viscore user will be double clicking constantly as they move about the model, so my advice is to get into this habit early on. Viscore does not have a typical top menu bar or toolbox buttons as found on many modern software interfaces. Instead, it makes use of an interface called the heads-up display, which puts needed items right on the screen and then hides them when they're not needed in order to enable full interaction with the model. Hover over the right edge of the viewer to display the tools, which can be used as needed. You can turn these on or off by clicking on them. When you click on them, you can see that activating a toolbox brings up extra controls in the lower left of the HUD. If you don't need a particular tool, you can turn it off to hide its controls to keep the screen uncluttered. Control H is a keyboard shortcut used to show or hide the entire heads-up display. Or you can click on this HUD label in the lower right of the toolbox list to turn the whole HUD on or off. We'll get into the features of the various tools in later tutorials, but as an example of how one works, let's look at the Visual Options tool, VisOpt. Turn VisOpt on by clicking on it, and you'll see several new controls in the lower left. To adjust any of these, for any numerical values, hover over the specific digit you want to change and scroll to increase or decrease. Or, as you're hovering over that digit, you can left-click to increase or right-click to decrease. You can also toggle lists and numbers using left-click or right-click. In the VisOpt tool, you can change the sky, which is the background pattern. You can change the focal length of the virtual camera with the F value. This changes the field of view and therefore the perspective of the model projection. A smaller number is like having a wide-angle lens on your camera, and a larger number is like having a telephoto lens. Near and far change the limits for zooming. You can see here as I zoom in, there becomes a limit beyond which I can keep dragging with the right mouse button, but I can't zoom any closer. If I decrease the near limit, then I can zoom closer. Likewise, I can't zoom out past the far limit, but if I increase that, I can zoom out more. You can change the number of points being displayed with the splat option and their size with the PTSZ or point size option. The point size is actually an interesting thing to consider. If you zoom in, you can verify that you're looking at the point cloud and not a mesh. You can see each of these little spheres is one of the points in the point cloud. This point size value controls how large to make each sphere. By making the points very small, you can see space between the points, and by making it too large, the points become big and chunky, and you lose surface texture on the model. This is a good feature because it lets you accommodate point clouds of different density or even variations across different parts of the same data set. If you have a portion of your model with a high density of points and a part with a lower density, you can adjust point size on the fly for best results. The best strategy is to adjust the point size to just block out the holes. To do this, make the points as small as possible without being able to see through the model. Note that there's a shortcut for this. It's hold down the control key and turn the scroll wheel. This is handy if you want to change on the fly as you're zooming around the model because you won't have to open up the VisOpt tool to make adjustments. And as a final aside, I'll note that making your points too big is one of the only reliable ways to crash Viscore. With huge points, most GPUs can't keep up and Viscore will hang. If you keep your points within any reasonable range of size, however, you should be just fine. One other tool that's good to describe at this point is the concept of bookmarks. The bookmarks are shown in the lower left of the HUD. Default is the name of the bookmark. There will always be a default bookmark. As you change your view, you can always go back to a saved bookmark by clicking Revert. If you make a change and decide you want to save it, you can either update the current bookmark or make a new one. To update the current bookmark, click Edit and then Confirm with Overwrite and OK. Revert then takes you back to what you just saved. But if you want both the old view and the new view, click New and you will see the bookmark name changes. In this case, I get a new bookmark called View 1. I can toggle between bookmarks to quickly shift among saved views. Typically, one of the very first things you'll do with a new data set is to set the point size and the preferred view and then update the default bookmark. We'll see an example of that in action in the next video. The configuration menu was something that we mentioned in the Getting Started video. As a reminder, the spacebar, clicking the spacebar, brings up a series of menu items here, which are collectively called the configuration menu. To navigate through this, use the arrow keys. Up and down to move among the items, right and left to move in and out of or to select items. The scriptlets menu will be one that will be useful eventually when you get to more advanced Viscore features. This is where you enable or disable individual tools that will be displayed in the HUD. For the moment, you probably won't have much to do in here, but I wanted to mention that this just in case you accidentally hit the spacebar and don't know what these words are doing up on your screen or how to get rid of them. In order to clear it, it's simple. Just hit the spacebar again. In closing, I'd like to share a few acknowledgements. Viscore was developed at UC San Diego. Please cite this paper by Petrovic and others if you use it. Support for this video series was provided by NOAA's National Oceanographic Partnership Program and the Pew Fellows Program in Marine Conservation at the Pew Charitable Trust. So hopefully this video gave you the skills to start interacting with Viscore. Look for more videos in this series to learn how to load and analyze your own data. And for now, thanks for watching.